Hey, I'm Brian. I go by BDougie, and this is my YouTube channel where I talk about some tech stuff. Talk about actually, really not just tech stuff. I talk about web development. Really, that's sort of my bread and butter and what pays the bills. So I'm going to be talking about that today. I'm going to talk about sort of deciding frameworks, what frameworks to choose, how to approach it. So let's just see where this goes. But before I jump in, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Super appreciate that if you could. It helps me, helps the channel. And what would really help me a lot, if you could just go down in the comments, let me know what sort of information you're looking for. I do talk a lot about GitHub Actions and developer workflows and automation. So if you want to hear more about that, just let me know. It helps me to know what types of videos and where to spend my time. So let's just jump right into content. So I wanted to take some time to talk about this tweet that I saw actually a couple days ago. Cassio, he sent out a tweet and he basically just quoted another tweet. So I didn't know who Nehemiah was. He actually updated his bio after this. But anyway, he's a web developer and he sent out a tweet that said, learning a JavaScript framework before learning JavaScript is like fill in the blank. Someone responded basically saying like it's trying to be a mechanic without actually driving a car. But I think that was debunked. Actually, you can be a mechanic and not drive a car. That's totally possible. But yeah, there was a bunch of examples where people just filled in the blank, and that was cool. I think it was like a good little. I think he actually got quite a few likes too as well. Actually, I can see it right here. Yeah, so he ended up getting like 868 likes, which is way more likes than I've ever gotten any of my tweets. Which, if you want to follow me and like my tweets, please be BDougie on Twitter. But what I'm getting at is that Cassio's mention was pretty relevant to me because Cassio actually spoke after me at a conference where I spoke on gatekeeping, and that's where his tweet really resonated with me because I'm basically on the lookout for any sort of type of gatekeeping when it comes. So I'll explain what gatekeeping is, and then we'll get into all the details about frameworks. But gatekeeping is the concept of sometimes it's hard for people to sort of level up or get into tech, and there's always this like you have to go like take your stripes on, or you have to basically go through the ringer and do your time before you can level up to like senior engineer, which is totally fine. I think you should actually put in the time and should put in the years and the work to learn how to become, the quality senior engineer everybody's trying to accomplish to be. But also, I don't think everybody has to do it the same way. Me personally, I actually don't have a CS degree. I have a finance degree that I got that I haven't used other than picking mutual funds. Yeah, someday. But what I'm getting at is that I don't have a degree. I happen to learn how to do web development on the fly, on the job, and I think that's okay. So if you happen to learn how to use a framework before you learn how to use the language, that is also okay. I know plenty of people who know how to use Django or know how to use Ruby on Rails, or even React, or even an abstraction above React would be Next or Gatsby. Those are perfectly good frameworks that you can learn how to use without needing to know anything about JavaScript. And I know that it's shocking, and I think that's counterintuitive to what most people are preaching around JavaScript, or even just about programming, where you need to learn the basics. And I don't think you actually need to know exactly the basics. And I have a story about this too as well. I had a friend, and this is actually one of the examples in the thread itself around being a chef. And I have a friend who is actually a chef and working at a restaurant back in Florida where I'm from. And the way he learned is because he spent a summer in Utah where his family owned he's Greek, and his family owned a Greek restaurant. So he spent the entire summer making Greek food and working with his grandpa. And then he went back to Florida and basically applied for a bunch of jobs. And Florida has some pretty good restaurants. They're like a lot of them are really within the seafood space, but they have a lot of culinary schools also in the state of Florida as well. So we have some pretty good chefs in the area. And when he went to apply for his first job and do the interview process, they asked him to julienne carrots. And when he went to go julienne carrots, he's just like, I don't know what that is. He's like, julienne carrots, like it's the most basic thing you learn when you first, become a chef, and you learn how to like use your knife. So then he's like, well, I don't know what it is, but like, can you explain it to me? in the interview. And then he was like, yeah, it's like you basically cut it like this. He's like, oh, sideways. You cut it sideways. Or actually diagonal. Actually, I don't know how to julienne carrots, so.
Let the knife do the work. Use the butt of the knife and slice those peppers nice and thinly. This is how you julienne the red pepper.
But what I'm getting at is, when it comes to frameworks, a lot of times, like if we just want to get a web form on the internet, so that way we can take emails, so we can create an email list and a subscription list. Like if that's the goal, then that's okay. You don't have to know JavaScript or know how variables or how scope works in JavaScript. You should just be able to use the tools that are in front of you. Like if Stack Overflow driven development is the thing that got you to where you are today, like keep using that. Don't stop. Like use what works. So what I'm getting at is like this conversation. I mean, it is Twitter, and Twitter is like it is Twitter. So like you don't. I love engaging on Twitter. I love having conversation. I love participating in this conversation. But like take it for a grain of salt. Like there are a lot of people who are quote unquote gatekeeping and telling people exactly the ways they should introduce themselves into web development, into a language. And I'm like, I'm not even trying to. I actually have Nehemiah's name and his Twitter account on the screen. Like it's not. I'm not really here to talk about him particularly, or even about Cassio and his response. But I also just want to make us hyper aware of the idea of gatekeeping and proceeding to how to introduce yourself into programming, into web development. So that's my goal, and I'm just going to continue on and just talk about frameworks as well. And my answer to should I learn JavaScript or should I learn a framework first? My answer is going to be it depends, because it really depends. It depends on your goal. Now, let's just take aside from maybe someone who just wants to get into marketing or collect emails or create a quick website, or maybe you're a kitchen manager and you want to get your menu on the internet, and you don't have the funds to pay a developer. Times are interesting. Some people are going through tough times, and you just want to sort of pivot and do something. So perhaps sell your swag on the internet. So let's take that aside, and I would say that group of people, they don't need to know JavaScript. They can just know a framework. And if they happen to become a web developer because their introduction was a framework, that's awesome. Now let's take the other side, which is going to be people who want to get into web development, who want to be the senior engineer eventually and be a competent engineer. Like my goal there, or the goal should be, yes, you should know how to use the language. You should know how to interview, and you should know how to julienne carrots. Like that should be, something that you probably should just read the book before you sort of walk in the door. But that's beside the fact. Like I would just say, I mean, the way I approach learning things is I go directly for the template. So actually I'll find implementations of someone who's already done it. If it's on GitHub, if there is a template, either like Tailwind's UI is a popular CSS framework. I look for a lot of templates using Tailwinds, and then I will reverse engineer how that was created in using Tailwinds. And that's how I learned. And that's how I learned everything. That's how I learned how to play music. I tend to watch a bunch of YouTube videos. If I want to learn a specific song on how to play drums, I'll watch a bunch of YouTube videos of someone playing drums of that song. And then I could sort of see the patterns that they're sort of hitting. I cannot name you like the paradiddles in drumming. Like those are all things that I know exist. I know a couple of them, but I don't spend a lot of time like practicing drum scales.
E and a 2, E and a 3.
Mainly because I'm just mostly self-taught, and I know I'm not going to go up on my goal for being a drummer is not to go up on stage and play for crowds or even play in front of the train station. Like my goal is really just to sort of blow off steam and know how to play drums. So that's my goal, but that's also why I don't know every single ins and outs in music, is because my goal is not really to elevate myself in a music career. So I mentioned this because I think if the goal is to elevate yourself into a career as a web developer, yes, you should probably learn how to do JavaScript. Now, should you read an entire book, or should you postpone starting any project because you don't know how to write a for loop by scratch, or write a for loop from scratch? I would say forget the for loop. Probably just grab Lodash, which I know is probably a no-no for most beginners. or told them not to use. But to grab a library, grab something that's already been implemented and it's already working, and just do it, and then reverse engineer back into how it works. So pick it apart, look inside, and check to see if like this is something you actually really want to do. And if it is, I would say hone the craft. So my drumming example is not a great example, I admit, but I highly recommend the same way you would learn anything. Apply that to programming. Apply that to framework. Now, like there's a strong conversation happening right now around specifically React. So I do a lot of React, and with React there's these two competing frameworks that sort of are this risen the ranks. I think there's a third one coming up, which is Blitz, but the first two are Next and Gatsby. Those are very, very well-known frameworks that honestly you will not go wrong by learning either of them. Now, I would say they're both quite different in their approach to web development and building websites and web apps, that you could spend a lot of time trying to decide which one over the other one. And my recommendation is basically, I would just skip all that, find somebody who you look up to and respect. And if you're not doing this, like I highly recommend you should find someone to look up and that you respect. Perhaps the people who work on this stuff directly, or perhaps the people who just consume it quite often and push a lot of projects out. I would look to them as your quote unquote mentors. Maybe they don't need to know who you are, but like follow their work and choose whatever they do. Because if you have examples that are like my drumming example, maybe it is a good example. So I'm sort of circling back, but I would personally just follow them and their intentions and how they work. Now, I also say this with the caveat, hero worship ruins community. So like, I would not say follow everything they do and do exactly to the T, but I would say the goal is really to find examples of projects you can use, projects you can sort of create. If this video was sponsored, I would just lay out a bunch of other projects that you should definitely try out and use, but unfortunately we're not sponsored. So if you want to sponsor this channel, I would be happy to share about your project and your template system to sort of publish new Gatsby or Next apps or fill in the blank. But yeah, so I say all this because to answer the original question, should I learn a framework or should I learn JavaScript? The answer is yes. You should just learn something and then move forward. I do want to throw out there is a really good YouTube course that's learning Next.js. It actually teaches you Next.js from the ground up. It does assume that you know JavaScript, so there's a caveat. If you look into actually learn JavaScript, I highly recommend Free Code Camp. They'll actually start you from beginning to shipping actual Gatsby and Next.js apps. So check out freecodecamp.org. They have a wealth of information on their YouTube channel. Also, I hope to have quite a few more videos of myself talking about content like this. So again, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let me know what types of content you're looking for, what sort of things I can provide to the community. And I would highly recommend, if you are interested, follow me on Twitter. It's going to be BWO on Twitter, which we'll just put a link below. I think that's probably the best way to do this. All right. Well, that being said, I'll see you. I'll see you on the internet. I should probably point out that Twitter is a wealth of information. Check out John Gold's tweet about GatekeeperConf, GatekeeperConf 2020. Call for proposals, but I'm the only one speaking. I think it sort of sums up what gatekeeping is. Also, I recorded a whole nother version of this, and I forgot to add in the extra excerpt for what I had talked about. Mainly, I recorded this with a different mic. The mic itself just started wigging out on me, so I had to turn that off. But what I wanted to mention is I gave an entire conference talk on gatekeeping in open source. Highly recommend it. It's a Juneteenth conf. There's a YouTube video already available for you to watch. So just head over to the Juneteenth conf YouTube channel. You can actually see me talk about gatekeeping in a full extent and how to get an open source as well. All right, now I'm really going to stop.